Welcome to MojoTalks, WatchClub, Legion, Season 2, Episode 8, Chapter 16. I'm Justin. This is Christopher.
Here I am.
And we're going to talk about it right on WatchClub.
Here we are. Welcome back. Welcome back. Okay, what did you think of this episode off the top?
Off the top, bit slow for me.
Bit slow, bit of a moving pieces around, bit of reminding us what was already set in motion and what's going to come back.
Yeah.
All in all. But here's one thing I wanted to do before we get into the show. It looks like I was wrong. I was having a conversation with one Jennifer Fike. It seems, and I said that Granny is some sort of a new villain. She's like the manifestation of the oil chicken. It seems now that it was not, that she is not. She's actually a benevolent, protective figure for Fukuyama. It would seem.
It would seem. But we can never be too sure of what's going on.
You can never really know in this show.
Speaking of Fukuyama.
But thanks for the comment, and
yes,
keep the comments coming.
They've been great. You guys are great. Speaking of Fukuyama,
yeah.
This week we got a little bit of backstory. Not a little bit of backstory. We got quite a lot of backstory, which was one of my favorite parts of the episode. They started it off, and I was hooked right away. Mm-hmm. One thing I really enjoyed was the fact that it gave us some insight into why Fukuyama was selected to become the machine that bleeds. And it's that he has a healing factor. He's a mutant and could take the surgery, which I thought was a really interesting angle.
Which is the concept behind the Weapon X project,
right?
Right,
in the comics.
Like a proto-Weapon X.
Right.
Like Wolverine.
We see Wolverine is experimented on and given these metal claws because, his adamantium is added to his bones because he could take it. He has the healing factor. They could open him up and he'll be fine. And it's an interesting concept to say rather than being turned into a weapon, this version of the program is turning him into basically a storage bank, a hard drive of sorts.
Or like some sort of a psychic safe box.
Yeah, that was a fascinating idea, that you'd need someone whose mind couldn't be read to hold information.
An unhackable mind.
It's fascinating to me because that makes the world feel a bit more lived in, right?
Yep.
It means that the powers that be are reacting to the situations that surround them, right? There are mutants, so what's our countermeasure to mutants? And I think using a mutant as a safe box is dastardly and extremely believable.
Yeah, it's so cool. So it's not just like Division 3 isn't just sort of an alternate arm of this universe of mutants that Marvel has created. It also has its like parallel backstory, right? That's very cool, and also shows us how the show is really economical with its characters, right? They're not going to introduce Fukuyama just to be some cool prop. You know, he has a backstory. He's part of it.
Yeah, and we were talking about it before, there's still bizarre aspects of his character. The vocoder twins still have strange mustaches, but I do feel like I understand Fukuyama a lot better now than I did an episode ago.
Hey, one of my favorite parts of the show was the scene where David is playing Desert Commander.
Yes.
Right? He's like in his astral plane, he's setting up the pieces, he's, this person's gonna go here. We see, I wasn't sure if it was Carrie or Lenny with a sniper rifle. Probably Carrie, I would think, but the two look similar from at a distance. I thought that was really cool and exciting, well staged. I was a bit surprised that it didn't actually happen in this episode, but I understand they're setting something up. That'll pay off later. So I really liked that episode, that scene. To me, if I can make a bigger point about the whole episode, I think that it was largely about knowing and not knowing, right? And this is a theme that they've talked about like since the beginning. It's probably been the most consistent theme from the beginning of the series. How can we know the world? And in this episode in particular, they're talking about how can we know other people, right? We get into this with the allegory of the cave.
Yeah, there was a lot of talk about like the nature of knowledge, how we know things. We saw that with the John Hamm vignette this week.
Yep, I think that this is one of the most consistent themes that we've seen in the show right from the beginning. How can we know what we think we know? We saw it a lot in this episode, particularly with how can we know people, right? And we see a lot of uncertainty about knowing people, right? Right off the top from the first scene with Sid and David, you see that like David can't really be frank with Sid or with anyone. Sid knows that David's hiding something, even though they think that they're like so tight with each other. We see David then later not being sure if the vocoder soloist is really controlled by autonomy or not, confronting Lenny, being like, is Lenny Lenny or is Lenny Amy? Is there two people in here? And so we see that more, and I'll get into this a little bit more when we talk about some literary allusions later. But we also saw the return of Melanie.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk about things you missed. How about people we missed?
Oh.
I really missed Melanie on this show. And to see her come back, and it seems like they're setting her up to be a big part of the end game. I think the really smart thing that they did was to make it absolutely clear that she is under Oliver's control and not directly under Farouk's control.
She's ours. Mine. Ours.
Je suis proche, mon amour.
But ultimately, I think that plays into what we heard him say a few episodes ago, is that he basically promised that he would be the one to kill Farouk.
Yeah.
And you know, whether or not Farouk takes him seriously as a threat remains to be seen, but now he has an external force somewhat under his control. So that'll be interesting to see how Melanie plays in, and if, you know, she'll be able to be an autonomous force, regain her agency, or if she'll just be a tool in Oliver's plan for the end game.
It's yet another one of these uneasy / ambiguous, uncertain alliances that we've seen so many times in this season.
I'm just happy to have her back in the fold. She's a great actress and a really interesting character.
My body lies over the ocean. So bring back my body to me. Melanie.
So Chris, I'm dying to know, what are these literary allusions you speak of?
All right, well, there's a few books being read and a few things being quoted in this. Here's the ones that I saw. Well, first of all, there's Plato's Allegory of the Cave. That was pretty straight up, almost word for word, up until they get into like present day. There is, I don't really need to unpack that much. We see Oliver quote a poem, and that was America by Allen Ginsberg, beat poet.
America, I've given you all, and now I am nothing.
The first like overt reference to beat poets that we've seen Oliver make, even though like I think David identified him as like he's like a beat poet the first time he met him.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and so that's always been like his aesthetic in a way, but we're finally hearing it. How is America significant? Well, it's a poem about the Cold War, largely. It's a reaction to that, the politics of that time. And the Cold War was like a war of spies, secrets, fear, and information.
And misinformation.
Yeah. Kind of like the war that we see going on right here with the Shadow King in Division 3. Okay, we see Granny reading something. That is a quote from The Phantom Toll Booth. Phantom Toll Booth is a children's novel. It's largely about the importance, joy, and adventure of learning, right? It transforms abstract philosophical ideas into like playful, memorable images, kind of like Legion.
Yeah, that's
right?
interesting.
And it also is about the how of knowing, like this episode, right? So really great allusion there. We had, the young Admiral Fukuyama. He was reading a Sigmund Freud book, Das Unheimliche, translated to, have you looked this up?
No.
Oh, then I'm really looking forward to seeing your reaction here. The Uncanny.
Yeah, well, I knew he wrote a book. I didn't know that was the German. That's interesting.
He's reading The Uncanny, as in the Uncanny X-Men series that ran for a long time.
That's awesome.
It's about, there's probably a lot to unpack there, but I'm not quite sure how. It's about, the familiar becoming eerie or strange or taboo.
Elements that are unique to things that you're familiar with that kind of stand out and become almost like unfamiliar.
Yeah. Of course, we've heard it talked about most recently in the Uncanny Valley effect. And then I started thinking, well, it looks like David and Sid are wandering around in Death Valley, like the Alkali Flats there. You see the mountains in the back. They're in some kind of a valley. Things are weird. It's like, wasn't it over there? I thought the thing was over there. So they're in a kind of an uncanny valley. I don't know. Maybe I'm stretching for a link there. Those are the literary allusions that I found.
Chris, we're going to have a stern talking later on because I do the X-Men references on this show. All right.
Sorry.
Speaking of X-Men references, when we get that great scene with Farouk and the driver, who he graciously grants the gift of the endless dream, which is a weird thing to choose for yourself. I think you'd probably get sick of that dream if it was endless.
I don't know.
Maybe.
I don't know. It kind of made sense to me. Like you're old. You're like, I know death is gonna come, and I don't know. It kind of worked for me. Although it seemed a bit easy. She gave it up just a bit easy. But I mean, if she knows who this guy is, it's just Shadow King. She knows she's not gonna win.
Yeah,
it's okay.
You take the best, alternative to death as you can get. He blows people up with his mind. That didn't happen to her, so that's. But she refers to the professor, to which Farouk responds, he's not here. And I think that's a pretty direct reference to Professor X.
One would think so.
Which had the internet talking. Because in this episode and in episodes past, there's been one character who has taken up the role of a professor, who literally professes, who comes on the show to give us lectures and theories and literally is spouting Plato, and that's John Hamm. So there's a lot of speculation that perhaps John Hamm is in fact Professor X. Now, there are holes in this argument. You want to get into some of these holes?
I mean, they'd have to retcon the character because, Professor X is British and has a British accent. John Hamm does not.
But you'll know that also in Legion's head, he has a British persona.
Right.
Perhaps, I don't know, this is a real stretch. Maybe the John Hamm we hear is like the English... the American John Hamm?
Yeah, sure.
Who knows?
The American Professor X.
Listen, I just want this to be true more than I think it's actually true. I saw a lot of people talking about this online, and I just thought it was such a cool idea to see John Hamm roll in with a bald cap. That'd be kind of amazing.
I don't know. I think that he might actually just roll right over a shark.
Oh,
at that point.
Yeah.
I mean,
have him not speak. That'll solve the problem of him having.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's not what I was suggesting. I was suggesting that him appearing as Professor X would be the show jumping the shark.
Oh, I see. Well, yeah, but I thought you meant rolling right into the mouth of a shark. Like he's on screen for 1 second. Hello, I'm here, and then he's gone. That would be a very Legion move.
We're gonna need a bigger boat.
Bigger love boat.
A bigger love boat.
Love, exciting and new.
Let's talk a little bit about some more John Hamm stuff. Now, whether or not he's Professor X remains to be seen. Personally, I don't think so. Maybe it's a little bit of wishful thinking on the internet's part. But there was a segment in his little vignette that dealt with the internet and its effect on interpersonal relationships.
Yep.
And it involved a young girl taking a picture of a chicken, the chicken appearing as a duck on her phone, and then the ongoing debate online. Is this a chicken? Is this a duck?
Yeah.
Is this a cow?
I think that there's a lot to unpack in the context of this show. There's, is YouTube the new cave from the Allegory? That's an interesting parallel that the show drew. Is a universal shadowing, right? Everyone else is a shadow. No one knows anyone. No one knows anything. The ultimate goal of the Shadow King? I don't know. But I'll tell you what, how I felt most personally involved here was the show seems to be drawing a parallel between YouTube and the cave, right? And so as a commenter on YouTube about Legion, I felt very implicated, especially with the story about the chicken / duck / cow. And I remember a few weeks ago, we saw that cow appear in Division 3 with goo on it, and we talked about it here, and I had a conversation with people about it in the comments, and now there's this debate about chicken, duck, cow, and I'm thinking, oh, maybe that was actually like a chicken that appeared and not a cow. Chicken, cow, I am the character in Legion now.
Yes.
I am that person who is uncertain if it's a chicken or a cow. Great, thanks, Legion.
Yeah.
I'm totally mind blown. You're pulling some inside out oil chicken mind effery.
Their point rings true in that segment, right? Like whatever they're trying to say, you really feel it because yes, we are arguing and debating what we're seeing on screen and what the validity of those things is. And I think it was a smart move for them to be like, is this something that is isolating or is it communal? And I think it can be, it has the potential to be both. I think that the perspective of the show was a very cynical perspective, and I think it's not unfounded, but I think that those kinds of things can kind of take over the internet, right? I mean, we saw it this week with the whole Yanny and Laurel thing, which this segment obviously made me think of.
You know what I think the show wants us to remember? Is that if you're gonna fight, you have to fight to save love.
Right.
So, fight to save love, everyone.
And that is an argument in favor of the cow, right?
Well, I mean, it was obviously Yanny.
Yeah,
I mean,
so-
the cow.
Yeah, it was obviously a cow named Yanny.
Yeah, it's a cow named Yanny.
Guys, thank you so much once again for joining us for Watch Club. If you want to subscribe to Mojo Talks and check me out on the Cinephiles podcast every Friday, we talk about movie news. Chris.
I do a show over on Mojo Plays called PvP, Pitch versus Pitch, where we pitch ridiculous video game concepts. It's a lot of fun.
And if you ring that bell, you'll get to find out as soon as these episodes drop. Keep being weird, guys.